Bueno, entonces vamos a comenzar esta sesión de la tarde con la presentación del profesor Stephen Wheeler. Stephen es profesor asociado de clásicas en Penn State University en Estados Unidos. Realizó sus estudios de grado en Yale y los de posgrado en Princeton, donde estudió literatura latina con Elaine Phantom. Sus investigaciones de doctorado y postdoctorado se centraron en el problema de la unidad de metamorfosis de Ovidio. Y para tratar este problema aplicó métodos de análisis literario como la narratología y la teoría de la recepción, cuyo resultado fue la publicación de dos libros que todos conocemos muy bien en el Centro de Estudios Latinos, A Discourse of Wonders, Audience and Performance in Ovid Metamorphoses, de 1999, y Narrative Dynamics in Ovid Metamorphoses en el año 2000. Ya como profesor en Penn State recibió una beca Alexander von Humboldt para desarrollar en el Instituto de Filología Clásica en la Freie Universität Berlin un proyecto de investigación sobre la recepción de Metamorfosis de Ovidio en la Antigüedad y en la Edad Media. Este programa derivó en una serie de publicaciones y colaboraciones profesionales acerca de la pregunta de qué significó Metamorfosis de Ovidio en los autores posteriores. Este proyecto además resultó en la edición crítica y en la publicación del Manual Medieval de Crítica Literaria conocido como Accesus ad Autores, o sea, Introducción a los Autores. Se trata de una colección de prólogos a los comentarios medievales sobre los autores que ejemplifica la centralidad del corpus elegíaco ovidiano en el currículum escolar de Francia y Alemania en el siglo XII, y revela cómo la presencia de Ovidio en el aula se configuraba a partir de la lectura e interpretación de los poetas cristianos de ese mismo currículo. Stephen también es codirector del proyecto digital Juan Latino en Penn State University, cuyo objetivo es publicar en Internet un sitio de acceso abierto con las obras de Juan Latino, el ex esclavo africano, poeta y profesor de gramática latina en la Granada del siglo XVI, que celebró con hexámetros épicos la victoria de Don Juan de Austria y sus aliados sobre los turcos en Lepanto. Bueno, todos conocemos las publicaciones de Stephen, de sus libros, sus publicaciones en revistas muy prestigiosas del mundo de las clásicas, pero algo que no está en el currículum que él nos envió, pero que todos sabemos, es que también es un amigo de la casa. Stephen vino por primera vez a Argentina en el año 2008, invitado por Pablo Martínez Astorino, para dar el curso internacional del CEL, nos visitó nuevamente en el 2015 en nuestras jornadas, ha sido un amable anfitrión de miembros del CEL que tuvieron la oportunidad de viajar a Penn State y siempre está al corriente de nuestros proyectos y nuestras investigaciones y siempre está ahí presto a colaborar con sus lecturas y sus sugerencias y bueno, y todo lo que tiene para ofrecernos desde sus investigaciones sobre Ovidio. Así que Stephen, welcome back to La Plata. We are very happy to have you here again.
Thank
Not
you.
physically, but you are here with us in spirit, at least. So, bueno, le doy la palabra al profesor Wheeler.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Emilia. And I want to also thank Pablo Martinez Astorino for arranging this opportunity. And I would very much like to be in the flesh, face to face, and try to speak a little Spanish as well, which it brings me to a point. In today's presentation, I have to either do the Spanish myself, or which may be so horrible for you to hear. It's actually Castilian. I don't know how that goes, but Old Spanish. So maybe Emilia, could you read perhaps the old Castilian when it comes up on my paper? All right, you're muted? Okay. So what I'm going to do is share a screen so that everybody can see where we are. And Okay. All right. Can everybody see? Okay, great. So I think we're going to need some more water. Hold on. All right. So let me begin with an explanation of the title of my paper as a way to introduce my talk, which could be classified as a contribution to the study of the traditions, transmission, poetic imitations, translations, and receptions of Ovid's Metamorphoses in the Middle Ages. The medieval idea that Ovid's Metamorphoses was the pagan or Gentile equivalent to the Bible is a significant example of the changing views of his epic creation. This idea has no exponent in antiquity or the early Middle Ages. It probably became commonplace, however, during the so-called Aetas Ovidiana, the age of Ovid, which stretched from 1100 to 1400. When the poet's elegiac poetry and metamorphoses became popular in the monastic and cathedral schools, and were equipped with glosses and interpretive commentary that shared the same moral aims. As biblical commentary, to teach students to pursue virtue and to avoid vice. An explicit statement of the similarity of the Metamorphoses to the Bible is, to my knowledge, first attested in Alphonse the Wise's General Historia. It signals on the surface that the Metamorphoses is a venerable authority that contains wisdom and truth, just as the Bible does. The background to Alphonse's valuation of the Metamorphoses, however, should be read in context. As is well known, Alphonse the Wise commissioned his team of scholars to compile and compose in the Castilian language a monumental universal history covering all time, from creation to his own time as the King of Castile and Leon, possibly anticipating his coronation as Holy Roman Emperor, which, however, did not come to pass. The work, begun in the year 1270, probably lasted a decade, but ran out of time as Alphonse's political fortunes turned for the worse. Still, 5 of the 6 planned books were completed, with the 6th being fragmentary. The main source for the greater part of the history was the Vulgate Latin version of the Old Testament. But a secularizing chronicle of the Jewish nation was not a universal history. To judge from the chronological tables of Eusebius and Jerome, the so-called Chronica Canones, which were a source for the dating system of the General Historia, what was needed were the local histories of other kingdoms or peoples, which could be synchronized with biblical history. The editorial team of Alphonse made a bold decision in selecting Ovid's Metamorphoses to be the principal source for Greek history, from the creation to the Trojan War. According to the Eusebian timetable, the first king of Argos came to power when Isaac at the age of 60, was blessed with the birth of the twin sons, Esau and Joseph. His name, that is the king of Argos, the first king of Argos, was Inachos. Alphonse, our nominal author, introduces the source for the story of the king's daughter, Io, to the justification for his new source. And here's where the first excerpt comes from. The first part of the 6th book, in the 26th chapter. And I don't want to butcher this. Amelia, would you read this for me?
Yes, of course. Bueno, lo leo, espero que esté bien mi pronunciación, si no Santiago me corrige. Los autores de los gentiles, o gentiles, no recuerdo cómo era, fueron muy sabios hombres, fablaron de grandes cosas, en muchos lugares en figura e en semejanza de uno oral, como lo hacen hoy las escrituras de la nuestra Santa Iglesia. Sobre todo los otros autores, Ovidio, en el Solibro Mayor, esto tira a la su teología de los gentiles más que otras razones que ellos hayan. El Ovidio Mayor no ne sale entre los, sino en la teología, en la Biblia, de entre los gentiles.
Right, so I don't need to translate this. For me, as a non-native speaker, this seems to be pretty fussy in terms of the usage of pronouns. And every pronoun, every sentence seems to be really sort of focused on getting the pronouns right. Ovidio Mayor or Libro Mayor is the conventional medieval title for the Metamorphoses. To call it the pagan or Gentile equivalent of the theology and the scriptures of Judaism and Christianity is a striking example of relativism. One would object less if Homer and Hesiod were called the Bible of the Greeks. But as you probably know from yesterday, they were medieval barbarians. So on the other hand, if one is considering the Bible as a form of history, sacred though it is, then the pseudo-universal historical form of Metamorphoses is a point in favor of its equivalence. Ovid signals the affinity of his poem to universal history with the prefatory topos of the temporal scheme ab origine mundi ad mea tempora, that is a generic hallmark of historiography. And you know, all one has to do is look at the prefaces of histories, and they tend to have this formula. One wonders whether there's an echo of Ovid's temporal scheme in Alphonse's prologue, even if it is a topos. And here is another extract from the prologue of the first part. Amelia, can you help me again?
Yes, of course. Mandé y poner todos los fechos señalados también de las historias de la Biblia, como de las otras grandes cosas que acaecieron por el mundo desde que fue comenzado hasta nuestro tiempo.
Now, the ad mea tempora in the proem of Ovid's Metamorphoses is sometimes read as a kind of competition with Augustus, since Ovid has his poem end in his own times and not in your times. As he says later in, I guess it is the second epistle of Tristia Book 2, where he says that he wrote a poem from beginning of from creation to your times, Augustus, changing the possessive adjective, amending the text, so to speak, from exile in the hope of gaining a return. So we could see we could read ad mea as reflecting Ovid's own agenda. And thus, I mean, when we look at the example of Alphonse, he is now the author of his own universal history. He's a king, and he's also an author. And so there's some question, perhaps, here about his intentions behind this universal history. I'll leave that there. Still, his work is not a real history. It's a mythological epicome, not a prose history, chronicling las otras grandes cosas, chronicling las otras grandes cosas, the other great achievements of peoples, kings, and empires. In this respect, Alphonse's translation of Lucan's historical epic later in the fifth part of the General Historia seems a more legitimate choice than Ovid Maior, in that Lucan denies the existence of the traditional gods and is concerned with historical figures devoid of faith. Justification for Alphonse's turn to Ovid's Metamorphoses subject matter, however, is not historiographical. Rather, Ovid Maior belongs to the medieval canon of ancient Autores, which qualifies him as muy sabio. The Autores, according to Alphonse el Sabio, and here we get a little more Castilian. Emily, can you help again? Amelia?
Sí, hablaron de grandes cosas en muchos lugares, en figura e en semejanza de un oporal, como lo hacen hoy las escrituras de la nuestra Santa Iglesia.
Okay, so this is a repetition of what we just read before, but I wanted to pay attention to it a little bit more closely. Ovid and other pagan poets, such as Virgil, are assumed to narrate figuratively, covering up the true meaning of their stories through the likeness of one thing to another. Veiled or hidden meanings can be revealed through the practice of allegorical reading, ad litteram and ad sensum, for which scholasticism developed a fourfold analysis of allegory in terms of historical, typological, moral, and anagogical. The wisdom of pagan Autores is ultimately their utility for improvement and enlightenment. If they also bring delight to the reader, that is a didactic plus. So while the Metamorphoses is not a historiography, its pseudo-historical Carmen Perpetuum presents a wealth of exemplary stories that the medieval reader can mine for moral lessons beyond the sacred history of the Bible. The inclusion in the General Historia of roughly 5 books of the Metamorphoses involves a kind of despoliation of the source. The narratological order of the stories is changed to conform to their new historiographical context of an ordo naturalis, and furthermore, to interweave the biblical stories gives Alphonse's work a more truly universal breadth. At this point, I'm going to talk a little freely. I'm sorry I don't have the text, but I will speak slowly about the next topic. I have material to illustrate, like a handout, which I'll show in due course. So I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to turn to the topic for the conference. I had Dante also involved in my paper, but he seems to have gotten cut out. So I won't go back to that. But what I do want to do is speak a little bit about Alphonse's or his team, editorial team's treatment of the first book of the Metamorphoses. This is a topic that has attracted the attention of Irene Salva Garcia, who's published a lot of good articles on the working methods of Alphonse's workshop as they compiled sources for the General Historia. The thing that I've noticed is that the first book of the Metamorphoses is not actually narrated in completeness, but rather used sparingly. So the question is, why am I'm missing a topic? Let me just see here. I thought I had, I was going to talk about Io and her trying to all right. I guess that's the truth. That's weird. Okay, so the first book begins with the narration of the creation of the cosmos. And it continues with the four ages, well, the description of the four elements, the four ages of man, the murder of, or the attempted murder of Jupiter by Whitcomb, and in addition, the flood, which raises the specter of, or the comparison, the similarity between the Metamorphoses and the Bible. So the question would be, does Alphonse the Wise, does he in any way take any consideration for the beginning of the Metamorphoses? That is the creation account. And so the answer to this question is negative. What I'm going to do is display what he does for creation, and then ask the question, if it's worth asking, why does he not do anything about creation? So what we'll find is, and I'm just going to try to pull this up, control of my computer here. There we go. So I'm going to go to all right, I'm sorry. I think I have to quickly see if I can recover this document. There it is. Okay. So I need to. this to move. All right. So let me go back to screen share here. All right, so general history. And I think I actually share. Okay. So. We go to the beginning of the manuscript that I have here. This is was put online by the editors of the edition back in 2006. It's just the first. I have the first and the second part, computer, and what we're going to do is look at the beginning of the creation. And the first thing to notice is that the action, so to speak, is not a direct translation, but rather a secondary level, as it is refers to the source Moses. And this is important because Ovid will be cited as the equivalent of Moses in a later book of the first part. So the equivalency that we've seen with the between the Bible and the Metamorphoses is that Ovid and Moses stand on the same level with each other. And Ovid also is a secondary narrator of the cosmos and the cosmogony. So that in a certain way, Alphonse is, or the narratorial voice of the beginning of the General Historia, is in a similar position to Ovid's Metamorphoses, where, as we will see in the handout that's coming up, the phrase quem dixere chaos refers to tradition when the description of the original state before cosmos existed. So this is not an issue for the authors of General Historia. They're not concerned with the theology, or aside from the fact that they're representing what's in the Bible itself. So we have the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, and the sixth day, covered relatively quickly. It's not, the account is not greater nor less than its source. This is not the case with other examples of universal history written in the Middle Ages before Alphonse's General Historia, which are sources for the General Historia, such as Petrus Comestor's Historia Scholastica, or Godfrey of Viterbo's Pantheon. And each of these authors spends a lot of time with the commentary tradition that explains, for example, that God is triune, that is a trinity. There's the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is not at all in the text. Or that there was no such thing as chaos. There was nothing before God created the world. The idea of the creation ex nihilo is a Christian theological idea that was first broached or brought to into the theological discussion by the Greek scholar Theophilus of Antioch in the late 2nd century CE, around the time of the death of Marcus Aurelius. And he is also backed by another Greek church father, Tatian, in this belief. So these are things that could have come up in the General Historia at the beginning, the question of the tradition. But there's nothing there really to speak of. And the question is, why? So I went and looked at the commentary that, one of the commentaries that was used by the team, Alfonso, to interpret the Metamorphoses. And that is the commentary by Arnulf of Orleans, but finished in 1170, roughly 100 years earlier, as part of the Aetas Ovidiana, the boom and study of all things Ovidian. And this commentary has a section which is called Allegories. And I'm going to see if I can share that with you now. Oops. Let's stop the share here. I'll just get it from the bottom here. Oh, it's always tricky. There. Okay, I'm getting close there. I wish I could get this up. I don't know. I had all this ready for you and then it disappears. Oh, there it is. It's already up. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. No, I haven't worked. Here we go. All right. Okay, so this is another piece of evidence to support a sort of a negative interpretation. It is that Alphonse and company are not terribly interested in creation as a topic. So I'm looking at the first allegory here. We've got a list of them here. Chaos, muchacho, and species. So what Arnulf does is he gives you an example, all the examples of transformations and their allegorical significance. And if we go to the the text itself, he begins, now let us comment exponamos on certain fabulae, stories allegorically, certain ones morally, and certain ones historically. So these are the three allegorical tools that can be used to find the deeper meaning of the episodes that Ovid narrates, and is the method that would be used on biblical exegesis as well. What does he find out about the scene of chaos's transformation into species, in species? Hard to translate. Something like into appearances or outward forms. There might be a sense of beauty as well. The chaos itself is without species, obviously, if we're going to turn it around. Anyway, he says that chaos is transformed into, say, beautiful appearances, was in the truth of the matter. Even or also with Moses speaking. Okay. Whence there is no need, or for this reason, hunde non indiget expositione, there's no need for a commentary. So what's interesting here is, to me, and I'm coming to the end of my time, but it's perhaps appropriate, that chaos is accepted theologically here, and its transformation into species is an acceptable way of telling the story as Moses did in his narrative of the 6 days. Now, as everybody knows, there's a second chapter to Genesis where there's a lot of repetition and inconsistency, reflecting the two traditions of the Bible, with the different names for the God, Elohim and Yahweh. So here, at least, if this commentary and allegorical explanations, which are separate document, were read, and there's good reason to believe that they were read. It's pretty much been documented, I think, well by Salvo Garcia. And the reason for the lack of anything to do with a cosmological interpretation of the acts of God is not necessary. And there's proof of that from Arnulf, who's representing this position. So at a certain point, I think that if you go to these other universal historians that are models for the work of Arnulf, one thing is to notice is that he's definitely doing something new. And that is translating this tradition of the Metamorphoses into Castilian. And And in addition, he's translating the biblical tradition into Castilian. And at the very beginning of his work, he's not going to put Ovid or Ovid's version into play because he is concentrating on his on the more important of the two texts, which will be part of his claim to authority in the church as he wrestles with the problem of his appointment or election to be Holy Roman Emperor and being opposed by the popes. He's not going to put in the front of his general history a polemical, or even if he cares about it, statement or view that contradicts the Bible. So there are other places, however, where the Bible is contradicted. I can't remember anything offhand, but I want to close by just pointing out that the part of the Metamorphoses that he doesn't translate in the first book is precisely the episodes that have the closest affinity to the Bible. And there are good reasons for that. I mean, there's the similarities have to do with mythological traditions of the ancient Near East, going back to Hesiod and further back still to the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, tying into the flood of Noah and the flood of Deucalion and Pyrrha. But that, if you look at the picture that was used on the flyer for our conference, it's Deucalion and Pyrrha. And Deucalion is just a plain old king. He's been humorized. And that's one of the things that happens in the hands of Alphonse, that he euhemerizes, which is to say he treats men as, sorry, he treats the gods as mortals who are elevated in status, apotheosized, if you will, after their lives were over. So he has a way out of to rationalize the Metamorphoses, and whether he agreed or disagreed with Ovid's account of the cosmogony is impossible to know. And I cannot go into this at this point, but there is a good example of another imitation of Ovid's opening lines in the model of Godfrey of Viterbo's Pantheon. I'm going to stop there because I've overrun my limit. But what I wanted to do is sort of signal that this is a great text that is mysterious in many ways. And one wonders what the meaning of the genealogy of Alphonse is. He traces his genealogy back to Jupiter and to Nimrod. And Nimrod, of course, I think has to do with the Tower of Babel. And one wonders what that all means. And while he's talking about the Tower of Babel, he mentions the gigantomachy of Ovid, saying that he's not himself going beyond human limits to challenge the gods. So with that, I will say thank you. I apologize for my movements. I realize that's disconcerting, but I have today reached my limit. So thank you again. And I hope there's something to discuss. And if there isn't, I have something for you to discuss. An example of the interpretation by the team Alfonso of myth of Actian.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. We have learned a lot about Ovid and Alphonse, and so thank you very much. Very interesting lecture. Abrimos el espacio para preguntas, comentarios. Si alguien no se anima a hacer una intervención en inglés y quiere escribirlo en español, lo tratamos de traducir. No sé si alguien quiere preguntar algo. Santiago, ¿no? Ahí me parece que levantó la mano.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. I was very interested in what you said about the consideration of time when Ovid says ad mea tempora, and there's an echo in Alfonso's text, hasta nuestro tiempo. And it's not really a question, but I thought it was very interesting that you said that, because in some prologues of other historical works by Alfonso and his team, like Historia de España, there's an interesting consideration of something that one might say it's very simple, it's a common thing, but to consider past, present, and future. But I think there's an accent, there's an emphasis on the consideration of this dimension of time, that Alfonso says it's our time, it's my time, or it's our time, and we are going to deal here with the past and see what it has to say to us today in consideration to the future. And there's an interesting line there in Historia de España that I was studying for a brief article, and I was wondering if this ad mea tempora that Ovid says, it's because you said it's like in competition with the emperor, in competition with it. So it's not topical, or is it? It's something that is original in Ovid, and I think that Alfonso might have borrowed it from Ovid or from other historical source. It's at least it is not original in Alfonso, but I was wondering if it is original in Ovid to say ad mea tempora.
I think it is.
Mm.
Though, I mean, there are similar expressions with tempora by Cicero, I think, or tempora mores, but he also, I think, uses that term to refer to his own time. So, I mean, I think that it's part of the, the semantic field, if you will, of the noun tempus, that it tends to be personalized in some way, but even so, whether it's a topos or an allusion, it still identifies the time clearly as his own. At the end of this, it's the end of the epic or chronicle.
Yes.
So,
of course.
but chronicles are always, they're dated usually by kingships. I mean, the General Historia is dated by the deaths of Abraham, David, and I guess even Mary. The death of Mary is in the book 5. That's a historical phenomenon, I think, is to look at the end of an emperor or king's reign as a kind of marker of a period of time. So, and the fact is,
And I was thinking, Stephen, that Ovid says ad mea tempora at the beginning of the poem, and we think about his time, the time he's writing, but then at the end of the poem, we learn that his times are the future also, because he says that he will live as long as he's read. So that ad mea tempora, I think, points not only to the present, but also to the future. So perhaps I am making a guess. Perhaps Alfonso, when he takes that phrase, that ad mea tempora, nuestros tiempos, perhaps he's also thinking about making or leaving a mark to the future also, to eternity.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that, you could maybe do it with what seems to be a kind of an innocent or a generic or expected type of limitation but I don't know if it's significant that they didn't finish the project. I mean, whether it's broken off, like we see other projects broken off that don't achieve their ends, or whether he just exhausted the team. I mean, what they did was phenomenal. And it's not just the translations of the works themselves, it's also the entire critical tradition that comes along with the tools that were used to read these texts are also translated. And those tools have ancient, in many cases, ancient origins that have passed through, hands of the scribes and readers from late antiquity to the 14th or 13th century. So so as far as future, past, and present, I think that that's a phenomenological thing too. I mean, the question is whether there's a present at all, or most times the majority of time is either past or future, and then present is kind of relative. So what do you mean by present? Well, when you're alive. So the last, I mentioned Godfrey of Viterbo. His timeline is to include Frederick II, the Hohenstaufen, Holy Roman Emperor, who died in 1250, or thereabouts. And it was Alphonse, who was also of the Hohenstaufen line, that through his mother Beatrice, I think, that could claim to be the successor of Frederick II. So given the fact that Godfrey had written this pantheon, which is a universal history culminating in Frederick II, it is logical that the same formula would be used by Alfonso. But the difference is that Alfonso is running the show. He doesn't have, he's displaced, in effect, Godfrey or, the writer that's praising him or writing the history to support his claims to political authority. To come back to the previous point about the importance of time and the future, I have to think that his vision of Castilian literature or the language is one of his most important contributions. He's like a culture hero who is very conscious of his self and his learning. He, as you probably all know, is famed for his interest in Ptolemaic system of the universe. It's said that he thought that God should have taken some personal advice about constructing the universe, which raises some issues. But I think he was very much aware of he's making his mark.
¿Alguna otra pregunta, comentario?
I have a question, but it's a marginal one, because I noticed in the text of Arnulfus, the Orleans, of Orleans, I don't know if it is well pronounced, that when he tells the tale of Prometheus, of the creation of man,
Right.
by Prometheus, he also evoke the robbery of fire by Prometheus.
Right.
And I noticed the same thing in Hyginus. It's exactly the same, and I don't know why. Perhaps I don't know why the authors, or at least two authors, deal with two topics, with these two important topics when talking about Prometheus. Is it perhaps because the story of the robbery of fire is so important that it is needed, it is required to be told, but because in Metamorphoses it's not. That's my point. This story is in Hesiod, but not in the Metamorphoses. And Arnulfus cited, and Hyginus too. In case of Hyginus, it's different because it's a mythological book, but in this case, I think that is an important, is an observation, a valid observation. What do you think about it?
I think that these variants that are included or not included are, interpretive issues, obviously, that demand careful attention. Silence is not necessarily a proof of anything, but you can try to make a circumstantial case that that the elimination of a crucial motif in a myth is unexpected, in some way violates the integrity of the story. That it obviously the theft of fire is a cause of great woe for Prometheus and also for mankind. So it's part of an ongoing struggle between the old gods and the new gods. And yeah, so I see that the mythographers are, at least in the case of Alphonse, are often brought in to supplement details that are not in Ovid. So he's collecting, his impulse is to collect everything. And so if there's something missing, like a detail that you mentioned, he's going to take a hold of it and put it in from one of his many sources. So the question is has to do with the motives of the writer. And so if you're a compiler and you're just like Hyginus or Hyginus, Hesiod is not a compiler, although he certainly is totalizing in his genealogical poem that kind of maps out the world in terms of family relationships. But that's also, incidentally, what Alphonse the Wise is doing as well. I mean, he's interested in the genealogical connections of royalty, and so anything that he can add to his overall universal vision is going to sort of drown out, if you will, or make less pointed the selection process that a poet like Ovid engages in, where selection is an important part of being a poet. The idea of inventio. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you.
Bueno, ¿algún otro comentario? Aníbal.
Well, excuse me for my English. Dr. Wheeler, I enjoyed your presentation a lot. And all I have to say is that let me remind you, all my fellow members of the Centro de Estudios Latinos, what Alfonso X had to do is to grapple with the issue, larger issue of what the Middle Ages do or does with antiquity. Is the whole heritage of antiquity a problem that we know St. Augustine, among others, had? In other words, we cannot ignore this legacy of the classical past, so we have to do something about it. And as Dr. Wheeler has explained, you have to go through these methods of interpretation that make compatible the stories of, for instance, Ovid and the Bible. So I congratulate you, Dr. Wheeler, because I modestly agree with you, but I have to add that what you have exposed is actually one episode more in what I keep insisting in the Renaissance Alfonsi. So we all are proud of, especially the Italians, of the 15th century Renaissance. But as we know, there are the Carolingian Renaissance, we have the 12th century Renaissance, and now we have Alfonso X. I'm glad once again that Dr. Wheeler has reminded us that Alfonso X translated the Pharsalia in the 5th book of the General Historia. And we can add Ovid, Plinio,
Oh, yeah, Plinio.
Suetonio, practically all the vida de los 12 Césares is translated in the Historia de España, and the Heroidas. Many of them, the Heroidas of Ovid, have been translated in General Historia and also in Historia de España. So we are really grappling with Renaissance and also the question of how Alfonso X saw himself in the context of the history of Spain. Well, his work was written in the vernacular, so in Spanish or Castilian or whatever you want to call it. But also there is something that we should remember is that he has, in a way, spoken of the preponderance of the hegemony of Castilla in the history of Spain. It's a problem that has haunted the Spaniards up until today. Today, the Spaniards, if you don't believe me, talk to the Catalans. They are still talking about what is Spain, how diverse Spain is, what is the role of Castilla. And let me remind you that the centralization that in a way Alfonso X tried to start with something that went all along the history of Spain with all these ups and downs, and was frankly consolidated by the Franco regime. If you want a centralization in Spain, you have to go to the Franco time, and I'm not going to get into details into that. And the reaffirmation of this role, but a very important lecture that Menéndez Pidal gave no in other place than Burgos, and in what year? Very symbolically in the year 1943, which is officially for the regime the Milenario de Castilla. So in other words, we are going back to the year 943. We go back to the Reino Astur-Leonés, we go back to Fernán González. And so Alfonso X cast a long shadow on the history of Spain, and not only besides the culture. Now, one more thing, Dr. Wheeler, it's not clear that Alfonso X really said that if God had talked to him, he would have, organized the universe in another way. I'm not so sure, or some people are not sure about. They question that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Thomas Carlyle has a biography of Frederick the Great, and he says it says it a little different. He says that the universe is a crank machine, and that he should have told God, how to improve it.
Right. Right. Well, one more thing, and just stop talking. Since we are talking of astronomy, the Tablas Alfonsíes, we are consulted all the way through Copernicus. So he had the tablas Alfonsí, tablas astronómicas with him. So it takes us all the way to the 16th century, 1543.
Right.
So yes, no, again, Renacimiento Alfonsí is something that we have really to take it seriously. Really, and the reason I'm saying is that because even in 2021, people keep talking of the Renaissance of Italy as if it was a totally new start, a blank slate, a tabula rasa, and now since we are in the 15th century in Italy, since from Byzantium came some Greek texts and so forth, everything started in the 15th century, and no. And again, Dr. Wheeler, I'm glad that you mentioned the relation with Ovid, because probably was one of the authors that Alfonso X read more carefully and assimilated more carefully than all the others.
Yeah. I just want to add to what you said, and that is, it's a question, actually, whether Alphonse saw himself as a sort of new Charlemagne.
Right.
That he was establishing a court like Charlemagne had with scholars and translators and
Right.
and poets. I mean, he himself was a poet. So there was a kind of, if there was a Renaissance, it was a Carolingian Renaissance,
Right.
as opposed to, say, the Italian Renaissance, which was, actually finding, discovering antiquity.
Right. Yes, I agree, Dr. Wheeler, although I would add that in the case of Alfonso X, we also have the Jewish and the Islamic component.
Right, yes.
So, which is really makes his work more, I don't know, universal or more what? More, I mean, wider than Charlemagne. But yes, I agree with you. Yeah.
He would be trumping or one-upsmanship on his predecessor. The emperor always has to outdo the previous emperor in some way.
Right.
This is Roman mentality.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Bueno, si no hay más preguntas, entonces damos cierre a la charla de hoy. Thank you, Stephen, again. Thanks for coming, for being here and sharing your paper. And we hope next time we can have you here in La Plata.
Yeah, I'd love to be there. Actually, what I want to do is send you books.
Okay.
Talk about that, because I have a library which I am trying to dispose of. So I have so many books that, and I was, trying to think about ways of providing copies of hard to get things. So.
Well, thanks for thinking about us for that. Bueno, gracias a todos y entonces mañana a la mañana retomamos con la próxima conferencia. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.